I realize not everyone out there is a sicko like me who eats, sleeps, and breathes Cincinnati Reds baseball, but you're probably excited about opening day coming up, and I want to help you know everything there is to know about the 2025 Cincinnati Reds in hopefully 10 minutes or less, get you caught up to speed. If you love the Reds, but you just haven't been able to follow every single thing that happens this offseason, this is for you. All right, so let's run through it quickly. So let's start off, let's go back a couple years. So 2022, the Reds lost 100 games, a very ugly, disappointing season, very low fan morale. But 2023 comes around. Reds were only projected to win like 65 games, had an incredibly exciting season with prospects like Ellie De La Cruz and Matt McClain coming up. They win 12 games in a row, and they finish with 82 wins. So high expectations coming into 2024. And as we've seen in Cincinnati sports in the past, expectations don't always pan out for our sports teams. Things did not go according to plan. There was a lot of injuries. It's also just a lot of flat-out underperformances, and the Reds finished below 500. The Reds fired David Bell with 5 games left in the 2024 season. Most were probably pretty surprised by that. Most thought he would probably get a pass for the season for a lot of things out of his control, but nonetheless, he got fired, and the Reds went out and hired Terry Francona. Terry Francona, a 2-time World Series champion with the Red Sox, got the Cleveland Guardians to the playoffs 6 times in 11 seasons, including a run to the 2016 World Series. An incredibly well-respected manager that left baseball for health reasons, but came back. The Reds were able to get him back, and he has certainly changed the perspective around the national media with the Reds because Terry Francona is as beloved of a manager as you will ever find. How does that translate to the field? Well, we'll have to wait and see, but the Reds couldn't have done any better in their hiring of Terry Francona. The Reds did not lose a whole lot this offseason. Their biggest losses were Buck Farmer, Jacob Junis, Justin Wilson, and Ty France. So not a whole lot lost from the Reds. They did make several moves, maybe not as many moves as people would have loved, but they made a lot of moves. And they were pretty active this offseason. The first one is they made a big trade, traded away fan favorite Jonathan India for starting pitcher Brady Singer. They traded Fernando Cruz, a talented but reliever that's been inconsistent at times. They traded him for a catcher, Jose Trevino, a defensive specialist catcher. More on him in a minute. They also traded a prospect and a comp pick for Gavin Lux. Gavin Lux played for the World Series champion Dodgers, was in the starting lineup during the World Series. He was a former number 2 prospect in the sport that's just dealt with a lot of injuries. He's still really young. In fact, he's the same age as Spencer Steer, believe it or not. But he's kind of had an up and down career. However, last season in 2024, he was coming back from missing an entire year of being injured. Really struggled the first half of the year, but the second half of the year, he was one of the best hitters in baseball. So how does that translate to this season? We'll wait and see. He got off to a slow start in spring training, but picked it up very late. In fact, hit home runs in each of the final 2 spring training games. So Gavin Lux, he's one of the real interesting pieces to watch this season. Reds also made a move. They traded a lower level prospect for reliever Taylor Rogers, a veteran reliever that can definitely help the Reds bullpen. Then the Reds signed outfielder Austin Hayes. Austin Hayes was an all-star in 2023, had a weird kidney infection last year that just kind of derailed his season. He's looking for a bounce-back season, but a player certainly with some upside. Reds also signed reliever Scott Barlow and brought back starting pitcher Wade Miley. We'll talk more about him at the end. Now, there are several injuries for the Reds going into the season, unfortunately. The first and the most probably severe and concerning injury that we're watching right now is Tyler Stevenson. He has a left oblique strain. He has another MRI scheduled this week, but it's very up in the air in terms of how long he might miss. Hard to really speculate. Reds are hoping it's not long. Reds are hoping maybe they could have him back at the end of April, early May, but they're going to have to go without Tyler Stevenson for at least a little while to start the season. Spencer Steers kind of had a weird spring training, weird offseason. He continues dealing with some shoulder soreness. He's not expected to be out too long. He recently started a throwing program. He is going to go with the Reds to Cincinnati, continue working out, hopefully go on some rehab games, and he could be back in the next couple weeks. We'll see on that. Andrew Abbott, the probably least concerning, knock on wood, injury so far. He just started camp slow, dealing with an injury himself, but he threw 4 really, really good innings on Saturday, looked great in spring training. He's probably just going to make a couple starts in AAA, continue to build up his pitch count, and he could join the Reds at really any point. Rhett Lauder was also behind kind of coming into camp. We did not see him at all in spring training, but he has apparently been throwing. The Reds are just kind of taking it easy with him. Very young player, young prospect. We saw briefly at the end of last season. He's probably going to start the year at AAA. No official word on that, and he could help the Reds certainly at some point coming up. Alexis Diaz, the Reds closer, he has a left hamstring inflammation. He's not expected to be out too long, but we'll wait and see on that. And then, unfortunately, out for the entire year will be Brandon Williamson and Julian Aguiar, 2 starters that we saw last year. They had Tommy John surgery. All right, for the Reds lineup, the projected lineup, at least what we'll see against right-handed pitching, which is what the Reds will face in Logan Webb on opening day. It'll be TJ Friedl in center field, batting leadoff. Matt McLain back in the action, batting second, playing second base. Elly De La Cruz, he's going to be penciled into the number 3 spot, playing shortstop. Austin Hayes will bat cleanup, the left fielder. Jeimer Candelario will likely bat 5th. He could be playing first base, could be playing third base, could be DHing. That'll probably be some sort of rotation there. Reds haven't made it exactly clear which direction they will go. Gavin Lux will bat 6th. He'll probably play either third base, DH, could play some left field, but probably mostly third base and DH. Christian Encarnacion Strand will bat 7th. He'll be bouncing between first base and DH. Could play third base if absolutely needed. Jake Fraley will likely bat 8th. He'll play right field. And then Jose Trevino, the catcher, will bat 9th. On the Reds bench, Austin Wynns will make the team as the backup catcher. Santiago Espinal will be the Reds' kind of utility player. Expect to see him probably at third base every day against left-handed pitching for sure. And I think the Reds will try to get him in the lineup as much as he can because he is the best defensive third baseman. Probably a lot of late-game defensive replacements with him. And then there's Blake Dunn, Stuart Fairchild, and Jacob Hurtubise, 3 players for the final 2 spots. That's the only roster crunch that still was yet to be determined at the time of me recording this. So those will also be a couple players. Probably see either Dunn or Fairchild, whichever one of them makes the roster, will platoon with Jake Fraley. Now, looking at this lineup as a whole, obviously Elly De La Cruz is the superstar. Matt McLain, you're expecting really big things out of him coming back. Gavin Lux, obviously I talked about him. Very big piece. I think can really hit right-handed pitching well. Can't hit left-handed pitching much, but could really be a big piece for the Reds against right-handed pitching. Obviously, Austin Hayes, he's going to be a big piece for the Reds. And then Jeimer Candelario, we saw him at times in 2024 look really, really good for stretches. And then other stretches, he looked really, really bad. He dealt with a lot of injuries last year. It'll be interesting to see with him. The biggest wild card is Christian Encarnacion Strand. The most power on this roster, can absolutely crush the baseball. If he's able to hit for a decent enough average, he could be a big piece of the Reds. And I would expect he probably gets moved up in the lineup as the season goes on. Jake Fraley and TJ Friedl, 2 players that we've seen play really well at times, but last year underperformed. Haven't shown a ton of signs of life in spring training. Fraley a lot less. So those are 2 guys really to kind of watch, kind of see what they're able to do. And then Jose Trevino, not much of an offensive threat, but he is a really, really good defensive catcher. Great at catcher framing. So he could help the Reds pitching staff quite a bit, but probably not going to provide a lot of offense. This is an offense with a lot of questions, but definitely some upside there as well. We also want to remind you that you can call or text 988 anytime, day or night. The 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is a place to get support for anything related to mental health. Whether it's an immediate crisis, simply wanting to find out how to connect with care, or anything in between, it's a 100% confidential, secure, and an anonymous way to reach out for help when you don't know where else to turn. To connect, call or text 988 or visit mantherapy.org to get help. It's okay not to be okay. Now, the starting pitching staff, this is the one area that you probably feel the best about with this team going into the season by far. Hunter Green will start on opening day. He had a great year last year. We got Cy Young votes. An incredible talent. Has looked pretty good this spring. expecting big things out of Hunter Green. The Reds need him to be that top of the rotation ace. The Reds will have Nick Lodolo start game number 2. He is like Christian Encarnacion Strand's probably the biggest wild card in this rotation. He's looked dominant at times this spring. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, but an incredibly talented left-handed pitcher with a lot of upside that could really raise the ceiling for the rotation. Nick Martinez is going to start the 3rd game. Just an incredibly valuable pitcher for the Reds. They've bounced him back between starting and relieving. To start the year, he's certainly going to be in the starting rotation. Could they bounce him back and forth as the year goes on? That's something we'll have to wait and see. Probably depends a lot about other moving pieces around him. Brady Singer is going to start game number 4 for the Reds. They're one of their biggest offseason additions. This Reds rotation, while very talented, there's not a lot of guys that have pitched a full season. Even Nick Martinez started and relieved, so he only threw about 140 innings. Brady Singer is kind of that guy that has been there, done that, has thrown a lot of innings, has pitched a full season. So he provides the Reds rotation with a lot of stability. And then Carson Spires is going to get a shot to start the year. May not be very long with Andrew Abbott looming and even Rhett Lauder behind him. But Carson Spires looked really good in spring training, looked really good at times last year, but struggled after kind of his first couple months up. He's going to get a chance to start, and we'll see where he ends up. He might also end up back in the bullpen as the season goes on. Now, the biggest question for the Reds this season, no doubt about it, is the bullpen, in my opinion. Obviously, no Alexis Diaz, so the Reds do not have a set closer going into opening day. It could be Pagan, Rogers, Barlow, or even Ashcraft. Ashcraft was mentioned as a potential closer to get save opportunities. Now, Diaz still at this point is the presumed closer if he comes back and everything looks good with him, but it'll be kind of a mix and match closer role to start the season. Sam Mold, talented pitcher. He's kind of been inconsistent. Tony Santillan, Brent Suter, and then Ian Jabot is going to get a shot. He actually was a non-roster invitee, but did pitch well enough this spring, and velocity and everything looks up that he'll be there. So the Reds bullpen, there's just a lot of wild cards here. Taylor Rogers is probably the most proven commodity. Sam Mold's pretty proven at this point. You feel good about them. There's a lot of other guys that you like. They're not bad pitchers, but there's also not just a ton of upside either. So the Reds bullpen will be something very important to watch early in this season. All right, some other players that you do need to know this season. There is, of course, Will Benson, Noelvi Marte, and Rhys Hines. Those guys all going to start the year at AAA. In Benson and Marte's case, they spent the whole year that they were active on the big league roster. Marte, of course, was suspended for half the year. But Will Benson didn't do enough in spring training. Wasn't terrible, but didn't do enough to get an opening day roster spot. He'll start at AAA. Certainly, if he goes to AAA and hits very, very well, and any of the outfielders struggle, which there's the potential for that, he could be up very soon. Noelvi Marte just has not shown any signs of life whatsoever. Struggled in winter ball, struggled in spring training. He's got a lot of work to do to get back in the Reds' graces. And then Rhys Hines had that incredible week with the Reds last year, but in AAA did absolutely nothing all year. He's a guy to watch, but he's also got quite a bit, I think, to prove of himself. Wade Miley is coming back from Tommy John surgery. Now, he is hoping to be back by mid-May, so he's a potential option that could be thrown in the Reds rotation in mid-May. He's a player to watch. Everything sounds good with him and his recovery, and he's starting to get back up to speed. But Wade Miley, kind of a wild card as well, could join the Reds rotation in mid-May. Now, lastly, some prospects that you need to know about. First off, there's, of course, Chase Burns, the Reds' number 2 pick from a season ago. Incredibly talented pitcher. We only got to see, it wasn't on TV, we just got to see some social clips of one inning that he pitched, and he blew everyone away with his incredible talent. Reds are taking it very easy with him. It's going to be hard to be patient with him because he's an incredible talent, but there's a very good chance that we do see him at some point in 2025 if all goes well. 2 starting pitchers at AAA, definitely worth keeping an eye on. One is a guy that continues to improve and raise his stock in Chase Petty. Pitched very well, had a really great start this spring against the LA Dodgers. He could join the Reds rotation at some point in 2025. The other is Connor Phillips, the guy that's gone the opposite direction, was a highly regarded prospect, but just had a really brutal 2024 season. he's got a lot of work to do to get back to where he is, but certainly a very talented pitcher. There's two relievers down at AAA in Zach Maxwell and Luis May, two fireballers. When you're talking about upside relievers, those two guys have about as much upside as anyone. They do, like many relievers that throw hard, struggle with command. So that's going to be the biggest thing that holds them back. But Zach Maxwell, probably a little bit more advanced than Luis May at this point. But both guys have the potential to be that back-end dominant reliever. And I would expect that there's a good chance we'll see at least one, maybe both of them in 2025. One other position player that we haven't seen yet with the Reds that I think is worth mentioning is Tyler Callahan. He's going to start the year at AAA. He was really, really good at the end of the 2024 season, played in the Arizona Fall League. He's a guy that could find his way onto the Reds roster if he hits well at AAA. And then a prospect that's probably a little bit more of an outside shot to play for the Reds in 2025, but continues to turn heads is Sal Stewart. He's probably going to start the year at AA, but he's a prospect that just is completely on the rise, had a great spring, looked really good. He's a guy to watch. And then Edwin Arroyo, the defensive shortstop, he really struggled this spring, but he also is a highly regarded prospect. And there's an outside chance that he could debut in 2025. So those are the guys to know. Now, in terms of expectations for the Reds in 2025, they're all over the place. First off, Pacoda projects the Reds to finish dead last in the NL Central. Only project the Reds at 74 wins and only give the Reds a 5% chance of making the playoffs. Fangraphs a lot more generous with the Reds. Do still have the Reds in last place, but it's by decimal points and only 4.3 wins behind first place. They give the Reds a 21% chance of making the playoffs, so a lot better. And then Las Vegas projects the Reds to win 79 games, so certainly right around that 500 mark. Should be a competitive division. The Cubs, I think, clearly have a leg up on everyone else. They have the most talented roster. You'll never, ever count out the Milwaukee Brewers. They just continue to defy expectations. They lost a lot of guys. They lost Willy Adames. They lost some pitchers, but they're always going to be in the mix. The Cardinals are rebuilding. Their projections are higher than it feels like their reality. But it'll be interesting to see what the Cardinals do. They're clearly taking a step back. They didn't spend any money all off season. So they're certainly a team that is up and down. And then the Pittsburgh Pirates, they have some really good young talent. Obviously, Paul Skeens as good as it gets. But the Pirates didn't do a whole lot. And there's still a lot of questions with that team as well. But we'll have to see how it all pans out this year. My thoughts with the Reds, look, I'm excited for this season. There's a lot of just question marks with this team that it could really go one way or the other. That's why I'm just excited to start playing games and seeing where these guys are at. I think that the Reds are certainly going to be a competitive team. I don't expect the Reds to be a team that wins 70 games, although it's possible. I think that they're going to be competing most of the year. I think they're going to give themselves a chance at the end of the year. And it's just those marginal things like Christian Encarnacion Strand becoming a bona fide, maybe not star, but a big piece of the lineup. Can Gavin Lux and Austin Hayes be big pieces of the lineup? Can guys like Nick Lodolo really show that promise and take that next step? And then can the bullpen, quite frankly, just not be a disaster early in the year? Those things get answered in a positive way. The Reds are right there. I think I have a really good chance of making the playoffs, maybe even winning the NL Central. But it's going to be a season with a lot of question marks. I'm excited. I can't wait for the season to get started. A little nervous, but look, I think this is a talented Reds team. I think this is probably one of the more talented Reds team, maybe an indictment of the past, but I think this is one of the more talented Reds teams than I think we've seen in the majority of at least my lifetime. So we'll see how it all shakes out. Of course, we have Chatterbox Reds here every single night, all 162 games. We do a live post-game show. Then we also have a podcast available everywhere you get podcasts. Now, I said I'd try to do this in about 10 minutes. Yeah, that didn't work. But hopefully this gave you as quick of a guide as you can to the 2025 Reds and gave you everything you need to know. Be sure to follow along here, Chatterbox Sports and Chatterbox Reds, everywhere you get podcasts.